Hello, and welcome to the coding walkthrough video for Prototype 0.9, or Fortitude 0.9, if you will. This is the game's third quality of life update. And what that basically means is not a massive amount of content has been added in this update. It's mainly been bug fixes and optimizations, and there are a few bits I'm going to show you content-wise, but it's not the world's biggest update, especially compared to last week's rather giant refueling update. This one's kind of a bit of a sequel to that one, really. It just fixes up various things that the refueling mechanic added, and also optimizes it a bit, because we did get some feedback that was a bit negative towards certain aspects of refueling, so that's all been fiddled with and changed. To give an example of that, we had a few playtesters in on the Friday, and they said the mechanics themselves at their core are great, but there are a few things that just need fixing up. For example, they felt that the gravitational pull of the Esteban gas giant, when you were refueling, if you had the ship in autopilot and you were sat in the fuel cell refueling, the ship would get slowly dragged towards the planet because of the gravitational pull of it. And the playtesters found that really irritating, because they were like, they had to keep adjusting the ship, which was more annoying than it was scary. And they said a similar thing about the red clouds that come after you, the nasty clouds as I've called them. They were a bit too fast, and again it made it not so much scary but frustrating. And so one of the main things I've done this week, and obviously you can't really see it, but I spent quite a considerable amount of time just playing the game and tweaking various numbers and fiddling with various variables and things like that in order to really get those mechanics working, because there is a fine balance between scary and irritating, and it is actually quite a thin line between the two. You've really got to kind of nail that balance, but I think I've done it. And as a result, a lot of numbers have been changing quite drastically, so the gravitational pull of the gas giants has been halved, and, well, more or less so has the nasty cloud speeds, although that's a bit less than half now, I think. Obviously, it'll keep getting tweaked and edited as things go on, as every game mechanic will do, I expect. But, yeah, basically just trying to get across that not a massive amount has been added, but a lot has been changed in order to kind of to fix up the mess that was last week's update, and just generally bug fix and improve things. So the biggest thing that we've added this week... Ooh, I should actually talk about this. This wasn't one I was going to talk about, but I will talk about this. And I've just realised you can't see my cursor. Let's get that on. So yeah, you're probably wondering what this is. This is Josh's early design for the Elka surface. As you can see, it's early because there's still drawings of various rocks and things like that. I'm not going to talk about this now, because this is literally just a playtesting thing. We're just testing it out to see how it works, and it is an early design, so I'll talk about it more when we actually put it in the game. So just pretend you didn't see that. It's not really relevant to this update, that's for sure. This has just literally been because we were on voice chat earlier and I was testing it all out just to make sure that it worked, and it does, which is good. But yeah, so the main thing that's been added this week is Riker. As you know from last week, Esteban had a teleported surface up here that you got teleported to, and you could go in there and refuel and stuff. So now Riker has had exactly the same treatment. So if I maximize the game here and show you a little bit of gameplay.
Autopilot engaged.
Come on, get in the ship. Where are we?
Autopilot disengaged.
We can head down to Riker, just down here. If I can fly the ship, that is. Come on. And we'll be able to enter the surface of it and refuel. Now, refueling is a little bit different with Riker. It's a lot scarier, and the reason for this is because right when we were building the design document, Josh and I were like, right, we want Esteban to have an asteroid belt, and it still doesn't have the asteroid belt, but it will have one. But then we came across a bit of a dilemma. How do we make... If the player wants to refuel, why would they go to Esteban if there's an asteroid field in the way when they can just go to Riker? This one, which doesn't have an asteroid field. And so we thought a long time about how we were going to combat that. And obviously that was something I started to think about here when I implemented it. But I found actually that Unity's kind of done the work for me. Because as you can see, Riker is coloured yellow and red. and so are the fuel clouds and the nasty things, which basically makes them a hell of a lot more difficult to see. Also, I have royally stuffed this up. I think I'm going to go into the core of the planet and die. Come on, come on. But yeah, as you can see, they're quite difficult to see in relation... Whoops. In relation to Riker itself. And that makes it a hell of a lot scarier, because now, when you're in the map, refueling or whatever, trying to find the nasty clouds, you can't actually see them a lot of the time because they'll disappear into the red parts of the gas giant. And yeah, so that's kind of that's one of the major reasons you don't want to go there, because you can't actually see the dangers that are around you. And the other thing as well that I've done is I've moved the nasty clouds and the fuel clouds much closer to the core of the planet than they are with Esteban, so they're a hot larder and a lot harder to get to. Man, I can't speak today. But yeah, I'm just gonna show you that again here. Slow down this time so I don't splat into the gas giants. As you can see, when we approach the gas giant, you get transported into the surface one, and obviously the player won't know that. The player will just think, oh, we've just zoomed in, where it's actually been transported. Because I'm so good at coding, they won't even notice. But yeah, so you've been transported to the surface game object where gravity is weaker, although not. It's weaker for gameplay purposes rather than realism. As you can see, you can just about see the fuel clouds there, so I'm just going to head to that one. So we're going to do a smidge of refueling, because I am on 23%. Let's just speed up time a bit. Alright. Oh.
Losing power.
Oh, I didn't slow down properly. What am I doing? That was a rookie mistake.
Losing power.
Rookie mistake. Oh god. Things aren't going so well.
Autopilot engaged.
Right, there we go. I'm under
Autopilot
under 30
disengaged.
speed, so I can autopilot. Let's head back up to the refueling cloud. What? God. Gotta be really careful with velocity in these gas giants, because they'll get you if you're not careful. They will get you. Alright, so head up to this bit.
Autopilot engaged.
Autopilot up. I just want to get just a
Autopilot
bit
disengaged.
closer, because there will be gravitational drift as we're quite close to the core of the planet.
Autopilot engaged.
Get out of the...
Autopilot disengaged. Autopilot engaged.
Just do a smidge of refueling. God, I can't see a damn thing. Okay, so we do have some baddies on the way.
Disengaged.
We got 20% fuel out of that though, it's not
Losing
too
power.
bad. So yeah, as you can see, it's quite difficult to see them. So we'll just head through and park this one down here.
Autopilot engaged. Autopilot
Just
disengaged.
want to get a bit closer so I can fuel.
Autopilot engaged.
There we go.
Autopilot disengaged. Autopilot engaged.
Nice parking job there. 70%.
Losing power.
Oh, let's just get him out of there.
Autopilot disengaged. Autopilot engaged.
Go. Now we're on 99%
Losing power.
fuel. We
Autopilot
probably should get out of
disengaged.
here because, yeah, those red guys are on their way. Speed up time. And off we go. And there we go. Refueling 101, ladies and gentlemen. So that was the major thing that we added this update. There we go. And back out into the map. The other thing I've added as well is a couple of requested features, which I'm going to just show you. So, as you might have been aware, one of the biggest issues we have in the game currently is how as is the transition between in space and on planet. Because if you look here, if I approach this planet from at this angle, I will be the surface is there. So there, for example, I'm just going to pause it just in case, but well. So yeah, if I'm pointing this way away from the planet, then logically you'd be facing away from the surface when you approach the surface. If that makes sense. So I'm facing this way, which is away from the planet, so when I transition to the surface, I ought to be facing away from it. Whereas, if we head in here, what will happen is I'll be facing that way, downwards, and because the surface is below you when you transport to it, I'll basically be facing directly downwards towards the surface, which is not ideal because then the player has got to rotate the ship around and fire upwards, and by then it might already be too late if their reactions are too slow, and then they'll just hit the planet really, really quickly as they won't slow down enough. So in order to combat this, what I've done is I've added a new mechanic into the game. I'm not touching the controls. See, the ship auto-rotates itself to match. Now, we're not going to survive this because I'm already at 150. But basically, we've got a new mechanic that auto-rotates the ship to face upwards whenever they transport into the surface. Basically, negating the need for the player to do anything or react really quickly because it'll do it automatically. Now, you may be thinking, but surely the reacting really quickly thing would be scary, and therefore that's something you should have in the game because of the overall fear thing. I thought about that, and I decided against it because I was like, that's not scary, it's frustrating, because suddenly you're facing the other way due to the way the landing mechanic works, and it's just, if you don't know what's going on, it's go over quite quickly, and that's annoying, not scary. So I was like, let's just add an auto thing that does it automatically, so that it kind of negates the need to do that, basically. So the ship just orients itself automatically, and then you use thrusters and fire upwards, because in all honesty, when the atmospheric designs of the game are done, you're going to have more than enough problems without having to worry about orienting the ship properly. We're going to have like winds and stuff. That's the plan anyway. What else have we added in this update? We've added the Riker game object. Just reading off my list here. Auto rotation function. Oh yeah, another thing we've also added is I'm not going to demonstrate it because I'll have to get back into Alkaloader, but basically what we've added is a small mechanic that now locks the zoom of the camera whenever you're on foot and exploring the surface of a planet. So you can't scroll in and out as you can with a ship. And the reason we did that was to combat an ongoing issue we've been having, this pixelation issue, where if you zoom in too much, as you can see here, the surface starts to pixelate. It's just to do with Unity's compression. Hopefully we'll actually be able to fix this pixelation issue, but as a bit of a botch, we've locked the zoom level of the player so they can't zoom in and out, because you don't really need to zoom in and out while you're on the planet anyway, and also it makes everything look a bit nicer if it's locked at a specific level. And this lock will only occur when you're on foot on the planet. If you're in the ship or you're on foot while refueling or whatever, you can still zoom in and out. So other than like other bug fixes and things like that, that's been the major thing for this week. You may be thinking that's a bit of a small update, and yeah, it is. It's just mainly been fixing and optimization and just a few implementations. And the main reason for that is this week's actually been cut short. It's currently Thursday, and as of tomorrow I'm off to Resd, EGX Resd in London, to represent Fortitude, the game. And then after that I'm off to Scotland for a week. So this has kind of had to be a bit of a quick update this week, but it has been a good one, I think, because it's optimized everything up and made the game ready for the narrative, which is going to be the next thing that I'm going to do. Not next week, the week after. Next week you won't hear anything from me because I'll be in Scotland, but the week after there'll be a big update coming. And I'll talk more about that later on. But for now, I'm just going to go through the code. There's not much to it this week. We've obviously added the Riker game object, which works in exactly the same way that the previous ones all do. It's just the same code, really. Basically, if the player collides with something tagged with Riker atmosphere, which the Riker planetary body is, not that one. This one, the outer atmosphere is tagged with that. Then set the Riker gas giant's game object to true, so set the surface thing, surface quotation marks. It's not actually a surface, but you know what I mean. Set it to true, and then take the position of it. And then it also does this offset thing, which is the same offset as the Esteban one that I showed you last week. And what it basically does is offsets the player's position relative to their approach to the gas giant. So if they approach it from the west side, then they'll get teleported to the west side of the surface one. If they approach from the east, they'll get teleported to the east, etc., etc. You get the point. And yeah, that's basically what that bit does there. And then it also enables the planetary map view, so the more zoomed in one, as well as dropping the timescale down and setting the in Riker atmosphere. No, I was right the first time. Boolean to true. And then down here we've got another, again, similar thing to everything else. If you collide with something tied with escape Riker, i.e. these 4 boxes around the outside, if you collide with them, then it offsets you in a similar way to how the other one does it. Basically offsets your position, so if you escape from if you're leaving from that way, then you escape the planet from that way. It's just, yeah, it's a pretty simple offset, and it also re-enables the full planetary map, as well as setting the gas giant's active to false, which saves FPS, and then setting that Boolean to false as well. And then the other thing that's in here that we've changed this week is the auto-rotation thing when you enter the atmosphere that I showed you earlier. And what that does, basically, if the need adjust Boolean is true, which is triggered whenever you collide with the atmosphere of a planet, which I think we've actually put in here. Let's have a look. Yeah, need adjust is true whenever you collide with the atmosphere of an actual planet rather than a gas giant. It then checks to see what your Euler angles are. So if they are if they're less than 180, so if you are, I'm trying to remember how I did this, because it's all mathsy, and I don't like maths. Yeah, that's it. So if you're anyway on the left-hand side of rotation, basically if you're facing left, no, that's not a good way of explaining it. It sounds ridiculous. Hold on, let me find the ship. No. We won't do that. I'm going to do a little demonstration just for you. Let's zoom all the way in. But basically, if you're on the left-hand side of the rotational thing, so let's grab rotation. Yeah, if you're rotating, oh my god, that way, or any way that way, then it will add where is it? Yeah, it'll add a torque to rotate you back upwards, so that you rotate up that way to face upwards. This is just saying debug.log because I was having a few bug problems with it. Otherwise, if you're facing the other way, i.e. if you're rotated in that direction or anything along this way, then it'll add another rigid body, add torque, that'll basically rotate you back upwards. Basically, it's a force that rotates you in the opposite direction of whatever way you're facing in order to get you to face directly upwards. Otherwise, if your Euler angles are within 10 degrees of upwards, i.e. if you're pretty much facing directly upwards, then conditions met, the Boolean conditions met is true, i.e. you've met the conditions for rotation. And then this bit here basically checks to see if conditions are met, i.e. if you're facing upwards, and if your angular velocity is, i.e. because what that add force up here does is it adds a force to push you upwards, but it doesn't slow you back down. So if we didn't have this bit here, it would just push you upwards to face upwards, and then you'd start facing the other way because the angular rotation would keep pushing you the other way. So this checks for that, basically checks to see if conditions are met, i.e. if you're facing upwards and your velocity is greater than 1, and if it is, then it adds a torque that takes your velocity and minuses it, so basically slows you down as you get to facing upwards. Otherwise, need adjust is false, i.e. we don't need to adjust anymore, conditions met is false. So yeah, what this essentially does is just pushes you upwards regardless of your current rotation, so that you're facing up, and then slows you down so that you're stopped and ready to blast upwards so that you can slow down and not die. That's the gist of that bit there. So now we'll move on to the camera controller script. We've got a few more lines of code. I've got to find, where is it? Yeah. So if you're in planet, i.e. if you're on the surface of any world, and you're not in the ship, i.e. you're on foot, then is walking on world is true, which is a new boolean I've created. Otherwise, is walking on world is false. And if you're not in the map, and you're using the normal view, which is basically the standard zoom, there is a helicopter flying past. Cool. And is walking on world is true, then it sets the camera's orthographic size to 2, so it locks it there so you can't zoom in and out as you would be able to before. Otherwise, though, if you're not on foot on a planet, then it sets it to scrolling sense, and basically you can scroll in and out as normal. And then the final thing I'm going to talk about here is the slightly improved AI in quotation marks, because it's not technically AI, but whatever. The slightly improved AI of the nasty clouds. So what they do now is they check the distance between them and the player, and then if the player's distance is less than 1,000 Unity units, and the player is refueling, then they move towards the player. But if the player is further than 1,000 Unity units away and they're refueling, then they don't bother. So what that basically means is when you're refueling, not all of the nasty clouds in the gas giant come towards you. Only a couple of them do, a couple that are close by. It was a change that made sense, really, because it's a bit ridiculous to suddenly have a million clouds converging on you. It's better to have one or two. Also a bit scarier, I found. And then another problem we had last week was the nasty cloud, would come towards you, and if they missed, they would just continue sailing off into the distance and go out into the middle of space or whatever, which is obviously kind of annoying because we need them there to harass the player. So to combat that, we basically done another bit here that detects the planet distance, which is the distance between the surface of the planet and the current nasty cloud. And then goes, if you're more than 2,500 Unity units away from the planet, then the attractor is set to the Esteban surface game object. So what that basically means, or the Riker surface game object, depending on where it is. And what that basically means, if the nasty cloud sails more than 2,500 Unity units away from the planet, then it gets pulled back down via its gravity. And then we've got a little thing down here that goes, if the attractor game object is less than null, then it adds a force attracting the nasty cloud to whatever the attractor is, whether it's the planetary body or the player if they're refueling. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm just going to delete that square there because I don't really need that. But yeah, so that's the update for this week. There are obviously a bunch of bug fixes and things that I've done, but I'm not going to go through all them because they're little minor bits. Next week, not next week, the week after, because I'm in Scotland next week, we're going to hopefully do the Rogue Planet event, which is this new idea that Adam suggested to us and we then improved upon, which is the Rogue Planet from our design document will slowly kind of move in to the solar system, and after about half an hour of moving in, it will suddenly crash into the solar system and wreak havoc. And that's basically giving the player a limited set amount of time in the game before the Rogue Planet comes in and destroys everything, which adds another layer of fear, which is really cool. And also it adds replayability because you might not be able to complete everything in time before you've got to escape before the Rogue Planet arrives. It's going to be a really, really fun mechanic to design. I can't wait to do it, in all honesty. So that's going to be, incidentally, Fortitude 1.0, because this is 0.9. So 1.0 is going to have, arguably the biggest and most important update the game's ever had. The first narrative implementation. So I look forward to sharing that with you in 2 weeks' time. Thank you very much for watching. See you in the next one.